Paul, yes. This international law, yesterday, yeah, I was kind of looking at the Chinese laws, yeah. And I'm sure there are attorneys that they think they understand the international laws, but having an exhaustive, yes, law dictionary so to make yourself familiar with international law. Now, I like the idea of it being too exhaustive, as in, well, we know we have to enforce the laws, but we don't want to. Now, I was looking in the Bible this morning, and there was an individual named Saul. Yes. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, yeah, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined light about him, a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Yes. And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. Ouch. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. Now, this Saul was, well, I would say exhausted. Yes. He was breathing out threatenings, and he was wanting to kill the disciples of the Lord. Now, a lot of times when you're into the idea of persecution, yes, let's say you've been spending all your time planning on how you're going to persecute me. Because a lot of those in the way, they dislike me. Yes. And they are just breathing out all of this profanity and curses and threatenings about how they're going to teach me a lesson. Now, this persecution, yes, of myself as an American citizen, it can be exhausting. Yes. See, you spent the last 7 years and 8 months thinking about how you're going to completely destroy my life. Yes. You've issued fraudulent protection orders, right? Where there was no need for a protection order because of personal recognizance. Yes. You've been issuing dissolutions of marriage where the laws of the United Nations were not being enforced, right? You've been taking what does not belong to you, and then during this whole time, yes, you have been persecuting me for wanting my rights enforced. The persecution of American citizens. Oh. Now, for all of you in the way that thought, well, we'll just be on each other. Yes. And he will learn to do things the way we say. You're probably exhausted. You're tired right now. Yes. You're fatigued. Ooch. You've been loading yourself up. Yeah. Now, let's say it's the persecution of a citizen, yes, that wants his rights enforced. And I've said it tens of thousands of times. Yes. And you sat there every day thinking, threatening how you were going to kill me. Ouch. You were going to make up crimes that were non existent. Yes. You were going to use fraudulent mental health evaluations. Now, in international law, yes. Well, there's the Brady, yes, and then there's an international law. Let's say you arrested me on January 4th of 2016. Yes, for the allegation of violating the restraint provisions of a protection order. But you wouldn't admit the evidence. No. Mm-mm. You wouldn't acknowledge I wasn't in Sequim, Washington. Yes. Now, this was on New Year's Eve of 2015. Oh, I would say, yes, any time that you fabricate an actual crime so as to persecute somebody, yes, it violates international law. Now, let's say I wanted to use the international court system of the world. Poop! Now, it's bad enough that you're tired, you're exhausted, you're stressed out, you're fatigued. You've been spending weeks after weeks, months after months, years of threatenings. Yes, you got. about how you're going to get this guy. Pooh. But in international law, yes, anytime that you have a fraudulent allegation of a crime, yes, and then you have a false arrest, a false imprisonment, that happens to violate the Constitution, yes, and then you use fraudulent mental health evaluations. Mhm. Well, let's say it's a humanitarian crime. We've talked about war crimes, yes. Now, there's what's known as the European Court of Human Rights. Yeah, this might be a court that I'd like to use today. Oh, see, the European Court of Justice. Yes. Now, there's a book, annotation clearly outlines the legal measures implemented in Europe to combat the trafficking of women for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Yeah. Now, I would think that there's a book in Europe, in European law, yes, that I could actually sue the United States in the European Court of Justice right now for allowing for the persecution of American citizens because of the use of fraudulent arrests. Yes, false allegations of crime right now. Now, my thought is yes, let's look through the books of the legal measures implemented in Europe, yes, to combat the persecution of American citizens. Just take the day off. Go home, bake yourself some chocolate chip cookies, and then think about this idea of persecuting Americans because of your fraudulent protection order. Yes. Where you use forgery. Pope. Fraud. Yes. Violates the VAWA. Oh. Violates the PKPA.